So, good morning, good afternoon for us, good morning for others in Latin America, good evening for those in Asia and Australia. Welcome to this webinar. The webinar is called "The Race is On, Bending the Curve on Nature Loss." And we're organizing this in support of the work of the CBD Secretariat, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, important UN convention with which UEBT has been collaborating for a long time. Since the beginning since the creation of UEBT, we've had an agreement in place for collaboration. And as you know, we are in the eve of the COP15 on biodiversity. We very much used to speak about the COP on climate change, but here we're speaking about the COP on biodiversity. It's COP15, and COP15 on biodiversity will define the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So we're setting targets for 2030 and for 2050. And I think we are, in that sense, at a decisive moment for biodiversity conservation in our planet. We are facing significant biodiversity loss, but at the same time, we're able to still set targets and all rally behind those targets to curb biodiversity loss, contribute to conservation and sustainable use. And as business, we've been calling for an ambitious and a very clear agenda to guide us and align our targets. And we're really hoping that our voices are heard and that we see a strong and bold framework emerging from the negotiations. From UEBT side, we have been working on kind of sharing some of the practical lessons that we've learned. And last year, we shared 10 years of experiences in a publication called The Big Shift Report. And then in June of this year, 35 of our members pledged to the CBD Action Agenda for Nature with a commitment to promote ethical sourcing from biodiversity in their day-to-day business. And in this particular event, we've invited 10 companies to share some of their commitments and unpack those very, very briefly for you to get a sense of the type of commitments that companies are currently making. And these are all companies at different stages of the supply chain, working in different sectors, but they all have in common that they directly work with a large variety of plants or plant parts, all derived from biodiversity. But we will first listen to the CBD Secretariat. After that, we will listen to each company making a very short presentation, a highlight of its commitment, and we will end this session with a panel discussion. And the event is really meant to show concrete commitments, to inspire ourselves, each other, the listeners, and also to exchange among business leaders. Lara, my colleague Lara, is putting the housekeeping rules in the chat. Don't hesitate to use the chat, present yourself, ask questions in the chat, and we can see if we can respond to some of those questions in the panel discussion. But before going to the business leaders, let me invite Marcus Lehmann from the CBD Secretariat for some opening remarks. Marcus, are you there?
I am fully here.
Good.
Thank you, Rick. Good time of the day to everyone. Let me perhaps start by thanking you, Rick, and of course all the colleagues from UEBT for the invitation to join you today and give some opening remarks. We from the CBD Secretariat are of course very encouraged by the level of commitment UEBT and its member companies have shown to support the development of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, as you just explained, in particular through the shared commitment as part of the action agenda of nature for nature and people. Now, as Nick already mentioned, and as most of you are aware, the parties to the CBD are currently developing the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So we just had an online meeting of the open-ended working group, We're going to continue our work in Geneva in January, and then that leads us to the second phase of COP15 in April next year, where the global framework should be adopted. So the framework will call for strong biodiversity action in the coming decade, and mainstreaming of biodiversity across economic sectors is obviously at the heart of its implementation, and businesses will obviously have to play a critical role to play here. But it will really be a collective effort across the board, involving parties, businesses, economic sectors, financial institutions, all relevant stakeholders, so that we basically kind of put public and private policies, align them with biodiversity objectives. And what can that include? It can include reforming and repurposing of existing financial incentives, aligning financial flows with biodiversity values, greening of supply chains, innovation and technology towards greener practices, etc., etc. As you know, due to the pandemic situation, COP will be held in 2 phases. So the first phase in a hybrid format will kick off next week, including a high-level segment hosted by China on 12th and 13th October. That will focus on the theme of ecological civilization, building a shared future for life on Earth. It is envisaged that the high-level segment will adopt a political declaration, the Kunming Declaration, that will really kind of include strong commitments by the governments, but also call for action on relevant stakeholders, and in particular businesses, given their critical importance in mainstreaming, as I mentioned. So the global biodiversity framework will have profound implications for the different sectors of society, and in particular for businesses. And for that reason, we at the Secretariat have worked hard in promoting the engagement of the private sector, including in the development of the framework, but then even more importantly so in its implementation. Because, as I said, the loss of biodiversity is a shared problem, and only through effective collaboration will we be able to tackle the challenges that lie ahead. Now, and that brings me to today's session, where we will hear from 10 different companies providing their cases on how they take concrete and decisive action to support the global goals for biodiversity and for our planet. And I very much hope that these will be inspiring and compelling examples on how thriving businesses are looking forward and identifying opportunities to embed biodiversity into their operations and processes, and in turn, building resilient and sustainable value chains, operations, and portfolio. We hope you feel as inspired as we are by these examples, and hope to see more of them, more positive examples flourishing and coming out and being promoted and presented in the coming months. In closing, let me just say that COP15 is, of course, getting a lot of attention. It will truly be a watershed moment, and we are very eager to welcome the post-2020 framework. But COP15 is also just the first step in the journey towards implementation, which will require a lot of political will, a lot of ambition, and firm and strong commitments from all sectors of society. And the business sectors, as I said, will be critical to its successful achievement. So we are very grateful for the ongoing support from UEBT and its member companies. And we look forward to continue and even further strengthen our collaboration. With that, thanks again for having me, and I wish you all a very fruitful event I look forward to the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. And indeed, as you say, you know, it's the parties, so basically the governments that are negotiating, but we do depend on this coalition of public and private sector, particularly for the implementation of the framework that will be set. Very important to engage for companies, hopefully even to go beyond the commitments and the ambitions that are set. And today, the idea is that in this session, we hear some of the concrete commitments and actions that the businesses are taking. We're gonna go through 10 presentations. They're all going to be very short. You see the slide in front of you here. We're going to start with David and we're going to end with Gaston. And we keep all the questions to the end of the last presentation, and then we will have a panel discussion and we'll also answer some of the questions. So thank you so much, Marcus. And with that, let's go to David. And I think, David, if I'm not mistaken, it's about midnight where you are now. So we're very grateful that you were able to stay up late and make it to this event. Go ahead, David.
Thank you very much, Rick, and good afternoon to everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation to the group. If I could have my first slide, please. So Southern Cross Botanicals is an Australian company that specializes in extracts of native Australian botanicals for the cosmetic industry. And we export our products to most of the major cosmetic companies worldwide. We're part of Lucas Meyer Cosmetics, which in turn is part of IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances. And for those of you who might be familiar with Australia, we're based on the east coast of Australia, approximately 700 kilometers north of Sydney. And to be clear, we actually don't grow botanicals ourselves, we just process the botanicals. We've got a network of growers of about 20 right across Australia. Next slide, please. So we're really lucky that we live in a mega diverse country in Australia. We have got 6 climate classifications, from equatorial in the top end to temperate climate in the south. That, combined with our isolation as an island for thousands of years, has led to a unique development in our biodiversity in Australia, where it is estimated that we have over 21,000 endemic plants and over 7,000 endemic vertebrate animals here. However, there is pressure on that biodiversity, firstly from climate change. Most of you will be aware of the major fires we had in the early part of 2020, where it was estimated up to 3 times the size of the Netherlands burned and over 800 million animals perished. We also see destruction of native habitats from the fires, but also conversion of land to agricultural use. And we've also seen a decrease in Indigenous involvement in land management. And the Indigenous people, the original custodians of the land here, had practices where they burnt back some of the biomass to reduce the fuel load. So when there are fires, which are a natural occurrence here, they were not so severe. Next slide, please. So we at Southern Cross Botanicals came out with 3 public commitments to try and help this situation. Our first one was around supplier verification, and this is to promote preservation of biodiversity within our supply chain. Secondly, Indigenous engagement. So we acknowledge and respect traditional knowledge. We will enter into ABS agreements where required, and we have set ourselves an objective that 10% of our critical suppliers will be Indigenous-owned businesses by 2025. We also want to ensure that workers within our supply chain are paid a fair wage and there is no child labor. Next slide, please. So given those commitments, what have we actually been doing and achieving? In 2021, we partnered with UEBT to develop a verification tool for our suppliers. And I'm pleased to say that we've managed to verify 5 of our top 10 suppliers in 2021. We've also achieved within our processing facility that 95% of our energy use is from renewable sources. And we also commenced a zero waste to landfill program, which we hope to complete in 2022. I could also share with you that our last 2 products that we've launched are organically grown, which means that there are no chemicals or pesticides used in their manufacture. And finally, we've partnered with a local charity that rescues and rehabilitates koalas. And that final picture there is a picture of Lucas, one of the koalas we sponsored on the day he was released back into the environment. So this really has been a lightning tour of Southern Cross Botanicals and our endeavors to promote people and biodiversity. So thank you very much for listening, and back to you, Rick.
Oh, thank you so much, David. And maybe you have a background slide that I cannot really place. What are we seeing in your background?
They are finger limes. So it's a native species, and particularly around the area around Byron Bay where we are, that we use to make one of our products. Okay, and you verified the supply chain as well? Yes, that is one of those suppliers that we have verified this year. Great. Thank you so much, David. And with that, let's go on to the next speaker. Cecile, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone from rainy Paris. I'm sorry. And thank you, Rick and the UEBT for the invitation to join today. So, you can slide. We are a venerable brand. At Guerlain was born 200 years ago, and it was the very first luxury pure player to propose both fragrances, makeup, and skincare. Guerlain is the second strong pillar of LVMH Group perfume and cosmetic branch after Parfum Christian Dior. And from the very beginning, the bee is our emblem. Ever since, we like to say, that we are a brand crafted from nature, and this, of course, has been evident in what we do in fragrances, but also in skincare, with Orchidée Impériale and Abeille Royale, our star franchise, making Honey and Orchids as a consequence, 2 hero raw materials we rely on. Before jumping in details to our biodiversity vision, I'd like to mention today that I want to stay very humble, because during years we made it our best regarding ethical sourcing, but in an empirical manner. Thanks to our perfumer, we had decade-long relationships with plant cultivators, for example, since 3 generations with our bergamot supplier in Calabria, and we already carried out, sustainable projects such as the introduction of vetiver in Tamil Nadu in India, or the installation of an innovative hybrid still for the distillation of ylang in Como. But today, we are at a turning point in tackling biodiversity loss, and we felt our actions were not ambitious enough. The issue was to prioritize our action where it has the most influence and impact. And in this regard, we became a UEBT member recently in May, and it really helped us to define a clear vision and drive focus. You can slide, please. So regarding a top issue, first, I'd like to mention that LVMH Group provide us a strategic framework, and of course, some maisons can go even further. In short, the group aims to have 100% of its strategic raw materials certified to the highest standards by 2026, and it has also begun to introduce regenerative agriculture programs with a target of 5 million hectares of habitat preserved by 2030. And at Guerlain, our biodiversity strategy is combined with climate. We want to achieve net zero initiative emission by 2030, and eco-formulation, circular economy, plus transparency, which is key, because on this field, Guerlain was a kind of pioneer in the luxury sector as we launched 3 years ago, our transparency and traceability platform. So we also naturally focus on bee preservation since our partnership with the Huyen Brittany Black Bee Conservation Association 10 years ago, when it came to source the best organic honey from a biosphere reserve of UNESCO. And since then, we multiplied initiatives to contribute to bee preservation. We dedicated, for instance, and now each year, 1 million euros to the cause. And even since this year, we empower women to beekeeping worldwide in UNESCO biosphere. You can slide. We are strengthening our commitment by expanding our support to our 40 strategic sourcing channel. And our end goal is achieving certification by 2026. And the assessment phase started this summer, and we already received initial recommendation to start implementing improvement plans, as we visited with UEBT the majority of our beekeepers in Corsica, Brittany, Seven, Finland, and we already work on how to relevantly address the challenge. And when I say we, this is correct, this is accurate, because we chose systematically to accompany on-site UEBT auditors to become completely immersed in the project in presence of a Guerlain Sustainable Development Team representative, plus our perfumer or R&D skincare team member. And it really, on each channel, we can really testimony that it changed the relation we have with our beekeepers. It unites us around a common project. It allows us to go beyond just a symbol and simple commercial transaction. And to finish, next slide, please. I'd like to share 3 lessons with you. First, by joining the UEBT, Guerlain has marked a significant new milestone, because I must admit it's quite a huge step, for a luxury house to communicate on these targets. When we consider that during years, that the most remarkable singularity of the luxury sector is that it didn't feel comfortable with labels, certification, and trusted third-party certifiers. So please notice that change are positively underway in our sector. Secondly, internally, this dialogue that we have established has succeeded in accelerating sustainable procurement on the whole, and far beyond the scope initially designed, to be honest, with UEBT, extending into commodities. And as an illustration, we launched 1 week ago our new Shalimar millésime fragrance made of organic wheat alcohol and organic vanilla pods from Madagascar, and it's just a start. And thirdly, to finish, we will extend our pollinator biodiversity impact assessment with UEBT on perfume plants to install apiaries managed by our UNESCO women beekeepers, what we call our Women for Bees, expected to be, a network of more than 100 beekeepers in 5 years worldwide. And furthermore, and finally, the UEBT team will support us at group level on the regenerative agriculture strategy, which is the next big step for us.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for this little insight in the luxury sector and the amazing work that you're doing. Yeah, you've had a long journey already, but this is clearly a next step in the journey. Thank you so much. And with this, we're going to go from luxury to herbal infusions, and I'm inviting Sebastian to please put the camera on and address us. Thank you, Sebastian.
I have done so, Rick. I hope you can see me and hear me. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
So I'm happy and proud to be representing Martin Bauer Group here at this event today. A few words on Martin Bauer. So we think of ourselves as a botanical, maybe the botanical company. We're active only in the B2B segment. The company is originating from our founder, who was cultivating, drying herbs and then driving it around for selling it as herbal tea. And today we are still very much a herbal company, tea being the biggest segment. Meanwhile, we are globally active and also providing extracts and powders for the beverage, pharma, animal nutrition and food industries. We are in a way fortunate because with 200 different botanicals in all various certification forms, we are really a company relying on biodiversity. And we are particularly proud of our own sustainable sourcing standard, which is called Marber Grown, that I will elaborate a little bit more now. Rick, if you could go to the next slide. So one of the two messages that I hope I can get across You may not agree with them, but this is really our strategy. Is we integrated biodiversity as an essential component of our global sourcing standard. Biodiversity is not a standalone project, but is an integral part of our standard, of our sourcing standard, just as much as social aspects are or food safety aspects are. As a company, as I explained before, we are really founded, our success is founded based on natural resources, and the prosperity of our group and everybody involved, especially also those who are our valuable suppliers, is depending on the availability and on the good health of the plant kingdom. We have a very special topic, which is wild collection. Around 2/3 of all of our products are not cultivated, but collected, which poses very special challenges. Our sustainability program and our biodiversity strategy is really based on, this is not very special, but on species, variety, and ecosystem. And at this stage, I really want to stress the importance of ecosystems. It is not enough to only look at your own cultivation, at your own plants, but it is much more important for the future to look at the ecosystems directly around them. Could go the next, thank you. We've based our biodiversity aspirations on 4 pillars, with the first being potentially the most important, but also most difficult ones. If we think about our supplier base in around 80 countries all around the world, you can imagine that a lot of these farmers and collectors may have more urgent problems than biodiversity. So it is a very, very big project for us to get everybody on board with information sessions to convince, with presentations, training sessions, newsletters, videos, and so on. So here really is the key pillar to our biodiversity aspirations. We want to be transparent on biodiversity, and we want to be held accountable, which is why our own sustainable sourcing standard is Marber grown, is also externally verified, and we want to really report on our successes, amongst others, biodiversity. We've built up a team and resources to support our partners and our partnerships in implementing biodiversity practices. This goes to conducting resource assessment and management plans in wild collection, biodiversity action plans in cultivation, and we are really supporting our partners there with know-how, but also financially. And we're happy that we're now involved in a variety of projects on biodiversity all around the globe. To give one example, is also a bee project with our partner Mesmer, financing flower strips in cultivation and around our cultivation. And of course, we need to increase the share of our sustainability standard and therefore also of our biodiversity actions over the next years. Next slide, please. And finally, next to growing our own sustainable sourcing share, we want to really point out that there is a really strong connection between climate change and biodiversity, which is why we're happy to pledge going zero by 2030, not only for our own companies, but also for our whole supply chain, because it is obvious there's such a strong connection there. Just to give one example, it is the reforesting and agroforestry around our cultivation, obviously helping to bind CO2 to protect our cultivation and creating a beautiful, valuable new ecosystem. This, in the shortness of time, is our aspirations and strategy for biodiversity at Martin Bauer Group. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. You know, and it's always very impressive to me to hear that 2/3 of your portfolio is actually wild collected, and that's quite mind blowing. And Marcus was talking in the beginning about mainstreaming, and this is what you're talking about as well, mainstreaming biodiversity in your standards, in your procurement. So excellent, and we're going to get back in the panel discussion on the issue of climate change. So. I see you later in the panel discussion. Thank you so much. And with this, we are moving from Germany back to France. We're moving from herbal infusions back to beauty. But what stays the same is the name, or at least almost the same. Sebastian from Yves Rocher, if you could please turn on your camera and share your presentation with us.
Thank you, Rick. Maybe for the first slide, yes. So I'm happy to be there to represent Yves Rocher. We are now a member of the UEBT since 2020. As we said with Rick, Yves Rocher was founded in 1959. It was almost the creator of the botanical beauty. And we have a lot of things that going on with naturality and using botanicals in our products since the beginning. So I would say it was quite natural to become a UEBT member, even if it was a little bit late in 2020. We are the #1 brand in France with almost 1.3 billion euro of revenue. We stated our mission in 2019, and the mission of the group, the Groupe Rocher, is to reconnect people to nature. And we plan to do that by promoting the link between our communities and nature. That's clearly something with the collaboration with our stakeholders and engage them in our mission. Also to develop, maybe one of the most important things, to develop products, services, and consumption patterns that are respectful to nature. The first thing is to promote frugal innovation and act in favor of biodiversity to protect the living on the whole value chain of what we do and how we act, since the sourcing of the raw materials and the botanicals to the end of life of the products. And last but not least, to support our teams as actors of this mission. That's clearly something really important. On the next slide, you will see that we already have a lot of actions and commitments towards biodiversity. We are lucky enough to have our own fields, and we grow our plants on more than 60 hectares in biological agriculture in Brittany, in Legacy, which was really the art of the Yves Rocher brand. We succeeded also this year to be the first French brand to get the UEBT certification for our ingredients in Legacy. So 9 plants that are grown in Legacy and that were certified this year thanks to the help of the UEBT and the help of the teams at Yves Rocher. We have, I would say, to sum up the commitments, 3 important commitments to fight against the artificialization of the soils. The idea is clearly to measure our footprint and then to suggest to our suppliers and partners how to do the same. The second one may be one of the most important for me as natural raw material innovation director, is to move towards 100% sustainable botanical supply chains. That's clearly something that we are doing at the moment. We are almost at 80%. The idea is to move to 100% for 2025. Another commitment is also towards our employees so that they can live experiences of nature wherever they are, in connection with our Reconnection barometer that we launched last year. We also have a lot of engagements and actions, especially with the Yves Rocher Foundation, that is called Plant for Life. It's more than 115 million trees that were planted around the world since a lot of years. We are also a big representative at the CBD convention. Claude Fromageau is the chair of the UN Global Partnership Business and Biodiversity. Next slide, please. Maybe for the future, what we plan to do, because you've had some beautiful pictures of our fields, of our lands, but it's not the only things that we want to do. We plan to put in place some clear indexes to measure what we do and try to improve. As you always do when you try to improve, first you have to measure. Then we measure our soil conservation index, and what we do in terms of sustainable sourcing for vegetal and mineral sourcing in order to move towards more and more responsible and sustainable sourcing. And clearly what we want to put in place, last but not least, as we did with the UEBT, we put in place a biodiversity action plan for our site in Legacy. What we plan to do is to have such a biodiversity action plan for all of our sites all around the world. And that's it for me, I think.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for the great presentation and the work you're doing. And with that, we're going to move directly to another part of the world, which is Vietnam. We're going to go to Lisa, and Lisa is one of the local processing companies that has also made commitments to ethical sourcing of biodiversity. And please, Lisa, we are interested in hearing your story.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rick. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. First of all, I would like to send my warm thanks to organizers and speakers of this event. And I also would like to send my thanks to all participants today. I wish all of you will be safe from COVID-19. And I'm Lisa, Director of Vinasamex. We are one of the leading companies in manufacturing and importing organic cinnamon, star anise, and other spices from Vietnam. And today I'm so pleased to have a good opportunity to be here to share with you about biodiversity vision and commitment with action plan. So let me start with some introduction about Vinasamex. Our company Vinasamex was established in 2012 with our 15 years of manufacturing experience. Our main products are organic cinnamon, star anise, other spices like ginger, garlic, turmeric, chili, and pepper. And our material area are in Bai, Lang Sơn, Lochard, and Bắc Cạn province. And 4 provinces are the northern mountain of Vietnam. We have a 3 factories, one factory in Yên Bai and 2 factories under construction in Lao Cai and Lang Sơn. We also have so many international certification. We have organic, Five for Life, Biotrade, SACCP, BRC, and next we will apply for Rainforest Alliance certification. At the moment, we are selling to USA, Europe, Korea, and Japan. And we are a social impact maker. We are helping 3,000 upland farming households to increase their income and improve their living standard, bringing jobs to farmers in local areas and common benefits for partners. We also contribute in making gender equalities, preserving cinnamon industry in Vietnam. In view of the rich biodiversity of our cultivation, Vinasamex can position ourselves as a provider of a wide variety of natural ingredients that are sourced with respect for people and biodiversity. Next slide, please. In the next part, I would like to mention with you about biodiversity vision, strategies, and priorities. We were so pleased to get the first prize in the third program honoring business initiative for sustainable development held by Cecile, UNDP, and VCCI in Vietnam in 2019. And we were one inspirational social enterprise of Vietnam in 2020. So we are so pleased to be a member of UEBT. That's why our vision is brand pioneer in Vietnam, apply biodiversity principle for our company's operation and supply chain. And our strategies and priorities are as below. We will build and expand one stronger and more sustainable value chain with 3,000 to 5,000 household farmers of 4,000 hectares to 6,000 hectares by continued trainings and applying biodiversity principle into system every year. And we also verify compliance with the UEBT standards, organic for life, Rainforest Alliance, Biotrade standard in our cultivation area and processing facility by third-party auditor. We will use the traceability of software for product management from material. We also continue to make more welfare regimes for labels and farmers. And we also would like to share our value of time and knowledge with poor farmer laborers, helping improve their life and keep the cinnamon industry in Vietnam under by the challenges and difficulty in the industries. And finally, we will doing business honestly, bringing mutual benefit for all business partners. Next slide. Yeah. And the third part is very important part. I would like to receive the attention 100%. That is our biodiversity commitment and action. Amongst the 7 principles, biodiversity conservation, socio-economic sustainability, and transparency in human rights and right to exploit and use natural resources and knowledge are always the first goal of Vinasamex. And we are on way to keep the commitment accompanied by practical action. You can see we will maximize the fuel savings and reduce the carbon dioxide. We also provide organic fertilizer and high-quality cinnamon seedling to farmers of 4,000 hectares. And we also create 2 or 3 training courses for 3 household farmers, organic cinnamon and star anise. And we also bring at least 400 jobs for local people and 3 part-time jobs for local people. And 90% are women, and we will help them to their voice and grow in their family and in the society. And we also ensuring fair price and improve qualities of life and producers operation. And we always give 10% higher price for farmer. And the final part, I also would like to mention with you our next step and target and time frame. Next slide, please. Yeah, in 2021 to 2023, we will continue to expand our organic cultivation from 4,000 to 6,000 hectares with 5,000 household farmers. And we also ensure at least 3,000 households in Vietnam can use traceability software and receive 10% fair trade fund. And in 2025, we also would like to build a nursery for children of workers near the factory. And from 2020 to 2025, we would like to build 10 charity houses. Frankly, we built 5 charity houses in Yên Bái province already. And from 2021 to 2026, we continue our sustainable agricultural practicals. So I hope my presentation today can share with you and help you to have a full vision of biodiversity as well as our biodiversity vision and commitment. And if you have any question, you can ask me, and I am so happy to answer all the questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and it's great to hear a voice all the way from Hanoi, and the work that you're doing with the farmers spread all over Vietnam, linking biodiversity also to people, because as you all know, biodiversity, we are as people part of biodiversity. And with that, let's move to the other side of the world. Marcelo, are you there? Can you put your camera on?
I hope so, Rick.
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me well?
It is nice to see you, Marcelo.
Nice to see you again.
Please, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Rick. And thanks for UEBT for inviting Natura to this super important event. COP15 is a critical moment to scale up the ambitions of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And business have a huge role to play. Natura & is a family of 4 purpose-driven businesses: Avon, Natura, The Body Shop, and Aesop. Natura, our mother company, was founded in Brazil and has been working with the Amazon Biodiversity for over 20 years to create a business model which places greater value on forest standing than chopped down. It was also one of the UEBT founders many years ago. As our family has expanded, we've leveraged our larger network to cascade this business model. Next slide, please. We currently preserve 2 million hectares of Amazonian land, an area equivalent to half of the size of Netherlands, and work with over 7,000 families in the region. Last year, we set a goal to help foster collective efforts towards zero deforestation by 2025 in the Amazon. To try to drive progress towards this goal, we are developing various innovative initiatives, one of which is an agroforestry project. Born out of concern that the widespread deforestation associated with monoculture, in 2008, Natura began a project to analyze whether palm could be produced more sustainably under agroforestry systems. We found the oil yield from the palm fruit to be 57% higher when produced under agroforestry. So efficiency and productivity boosted. And we are excited by the future of prospect of this solution. On next slide, please. We've learned many lessons on our journey on biodiversity, two of which I think it's worthwhile mentioning here. The first one is that the standing forest provides many economic opportunities for people. Initiatives which preserve biodiversity do not only help nature to prosper, but can also help business to prosper and the communities to prosper. We attribute much of the success of Natura's 20-year-old Ecos line to its natural ingredients like açaí or ucuba, the sourcing of which doesn't just protect the forest, but actually regenerates it. So the more we sell, the more we regenerate the forest. And we have much to learn from the Amazonian communities who have lived in harmony for nature for over 20,000 years. They are the true guardians of the forest. Their wisdom, traditions, and costumes are invaluable when it comes to halting and reversing nature laws. Next slide, please. Last year, we launched Commitment to Life, a set of 31 targets to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues, including the biodiversity crisis. This includes expanding our influence on forest preservation to 3 million hectares, extending our work from 33 to 40 communities that we work with, helping to create science-based targets with our network of partners in the Science Based Targets Network, and sharing at least 60 million in value with Amazonian communities, all by 2030. It is an ambitious plan, but we won't get there alone. Policymakers, business, and civil society alike must step up to the challenge. This starts with COP15 and continues on building a more ambitious framework for the use of biodiversity. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. And you know, it's very interesting to see because you have a lot of actions in your supply chain, and but you're also extremely active in helping to shape this global agenda as Natura & Co. You have a very strong voice, and I really hope that that voice is heard by those that are negotiating the new framework. And with that, I would like to go to the next speaker, Noel, who works at the Refem, who is sitting in Nigeria, if I'm not misinformed. Noel, the floor is yours.
All right, Rick, thank you very much for having me. Good day, everybody. Depending on where you're hearing me from, I'm Noel. I'm representing Refem. And this is an African voice adding to the global challenge we have and on biodiversity. I trust the little we're doing, and I'm going to say we are more like the starters. I'm looking at all the speakers before me and all the things we're doing in various regions of the world. And I'm saying that we are getting motivated as well here at Refem, hearing what we are saying. So Refem is a company that started operations somewhere in 1999. It was registered, and it just registered as a trading company. But along the chain, we saw our interest was more in the derivatives from nature, in botanicals, herbals, and the likes, and that was what built up our interest. And along the line, in the course of trading and all of that, activities and events, people we are meeting along the chain started pointing our direction towards the sustainability goals, biodiversity issues, matters that the fact that we are taken from nature should be a major issue for us. And that was how we got into the Union of Ethical Biotrade. And our top priorities immediately began. We switched focus a little bit from the trading aspect of what we're doing as a company into knowing we have to start improving on where these things are coming from. And that was the relationship we started developing. And when we got into the nick of what we're doing, we realized most of the products we deal in, farmers are involved, communities are involved, nature is involved, environment is involved. And we looked at it, began to notice gaps, issues, challenges with how these things will run. And then the issue of sustainability became a factor. And so when we looked at it, we zeroed in on where we felt we have some comparative advantage, or how we begin to encourage these communities and people towards sustainability. And so we began to work towards improving soil conditions for farmers. Because of the environment where we are located, you will see the Sudan Savannah corridor. We begin to have issues of climate change, where communities are literally, because of the change in environment, water, desertification, creeping in, and communities literally have to move. And so we came in on our biodiversity priorities to begin to see how we guide against this, build a form of a shield to begin to protect these issues. And so we started teaching farmers to reduce the use of pesticide, learn to plant trees, begin to go back to natural farming, to become our way, our practice, rather than depending so much on chemicals and stuffs like that. And so these are the things we are encouraging in the communities where we work. And we realize that in doing all of this, there are social issues and needs for our people. And so we began to communicate with them. You don't have to leave the environment, we can improve on it. And all of this we are doing by seeking to build standards, improve what they do by coming back with cash payments for farmers as they meet up with set goals and targets. We began to run gender equality programs for communities, so as to begin to deal with so many gender-related issues. We are also involved in providing water, sustainable water. We discovered this were some of the social issues that some of these local communities have to deal with. And at the moment, I can report, basically, for the little time we have been with UEBT, I think we started in 2017, we became members. We've done 5 boreholes, water wells for 5 different communities. And this is reaching a population of over 30,000 people, just to build on these social issues that we are dealing with. And it's been a good learning curve for us on the issue of biodiversity, and it's helping us really to begin to set the targets that we are looking for. It's a huge call on our path as to the things we need to do, but we are leveraging on the little experiences that we have gained to see how between now and we set our ethical target is for 2030, to see how all the things we do, the growth, the expansions, will be sustainable over time and in protecting this environment where this unique product comes from. And by the way, I must say our unique product is hibiscus, and I hope you do enjoy this glass of tea with us. Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you so much, Noel. And indeed, hibiscus is your star product. And I was always surprised when I went to Mexico. And if you go to Mexico and you have lunch, this is standing on your table. And I didn't realize that the majority of it comes actually from Africa, from, for example, Nigeria. So thank you so much for this African voice. And very interesting as well to see the kind of the change to go from trader to an integration of the supply chain. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going back to Europe. We're going to Switzerland. Gianluca, if you can switch on your camera and address this panel, please.
Thanks, Rick, and hello, everybody. Very glad to be here today with you and to represent where we stand today as Firmenich on this journey. So next slide, please. Firmenich is a family-owned company, the #1 privately owned fragrance and taste company with 125 years of history, and which has been also since a long time in a journey on sustainability. We started having a sustainability strategy in '91, which has been ongoing, increasing, and being more and more embedded in our day-to-day activities, in our strategies, business deliverables, and obviously in our procurement strategy. Because of that, since 2014, we've been member of UEBT as Firmenich Grasse, which is our center of excellence on naturals, and since this year, at total group level now, member of UEBT. We have quite a lot of dependencies on biodiversity. That's why it's key for us. Today, we source over 350 species, and from very different places around the world with very different farmer sizes. So the work that we've done in 2020 on a materiality assessment has showed how key biodiversity is, and notably regenerative agriculture and deforestation. Next slide, please. So how can we contribute to bending the curve? Well, we think that more and more, and I think someone before said we're moving from artisanal to more structured, to more ambitious. I think that this is really, to me, one of the key takeaways that I take from other presentations, and that you also see in ours, is we're moving now more and more to science-based targets, data-driven, and definitely it's fully embedding those targets in our corporate life. So our corporate waste management totally integrates climate and biodiversity. And we have now set a framework and an approach that is really end-to-end. And I will elaborate later on, because it's really about linking from the customer to the clients, to ourselves, our suppliers, and up to the farmers. So how we've done it, we're working in our operations, so where we do have concrete actions to contribute to biodiversity protection. To our innovation, we've been the first company in the world to have our ABS due diligence verified by UEBT. And in our sourcing, where we are embedding biodiversity as a key component of our ingredient sources. Our integrated biodiversity strategy has now been verified by UEBT, and we have now a clear and structured 3-year work plan. Next. Where are we going? So we've decided to, as I said, to be more and more data-driven, to have concrete targets. So we have now time-bound targets on biodiversity and responsible procurement. Apart from more in general, our full commitment to regenerative agriculture and our membership of OB2B. We have now set in our targets, by the way, more to this tomorrow when we are issuing our annual report. So by 2025, we're going to have at least our top key ingredients, natural ingredients, certified and verified. Our risk management fully integrating biodiversity topic for 100% of our natural sourcing, and 10 new sourcing partnerships, 2 of which have already been started on LME in Philippines and on Oris in France. By 2030, we want to have 90% of our terpenes and resins fully certified through FSC and PEFC, and have 10 more direct partnerships on farming, taking actions on regenerative agriculture. Next. So what have we learned until now on this journey? Well, key takeaways. I think the #1, and it's been highlighted also by other people, It's enhancing biodiversity really requires engaging all the actors along the value chain. So from the final consumer to the farmer, passing by brands, producers, and suppliers. We need a well-balanced approach. I mean, switching all chemicals to naturals is not going to help. We're going to have a dramatic impact on the footprint, so it needs to be well thought and well balanced. And because of that, we work on solutions that include green chemistry, biotechnology, upcycling, and derivatives of natural products. We need to raise the bar within our industry. We need to work with like-minded people all along the chain, but also changing consumption patterns. An example is the work that we're doing on taste systems in order to drive that end-to-end change in the value chain. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and I give it over back to Rick.
Thank you so much, Gianluca. And indeed, you're already starting to make reference to some of the key takeaways, like the importance of science-based targets and data-driven approaches. Well, thank you so much for this. And we're directly going to move to the next presentation. We are giving the word to Annette, who works for Weleda, a long-standing partner of UEBT. Annette, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rick, and hello, everyone. 100 years of Weleda and our commitment to the protection of biodiversity is all about our future. Next slide, please. Who we are, I mean, you can read it from here, but basically we're an anthroposophic founded company, and we're 100 years old, and the anthroposophic approach is mainly the holistic approach. And holistically seen, biodiversity, protection of people, this all belongs together, as well as climate issues. And therefore, whenever we do something, when we act, we try to implement the holistic approach in everything we do. Next slide, please. So our vision, and this was just newly set up by our executives, is to create a world in which the health and beauty of human beings and nature continually unfold. We have now set up as well a strategy, a company-wide strategy, and the alignment, these are just 2 points touching the biodiversity issue, shows that the one thing is to really act impact positive in everything we're doing. So this is related to our products, but of course as well to all the ingredients we're using in our product. And with acting positive, it's of course important to promote awareness of the connection between people and nature. And the consumer behavior, from our point of view, is a very key element to bring better conditions to biodiversity. Next slide, please. So what we have done so far, we are a UEBT member since 2010, and before we already had a high share of organic certified raw materials, because that's just in the anthroposophic sense, and as well share nowadays of 30% biodynamic, which we think is comparable to regenerative. We did now with the ESS certification, we went through a verification of more than 60 of our supply chains, and the number is rising continuously. And as well, we started much more communication towards suppliers, of course, with conducting all these verifications, and to our consumers as well, why we do this and how we're doing it. Important, as said before, long-term partnerships, invest in your partners, build with them a better world, and get them as well to official commitments for the protection of biodiversity. And one thing we're doing as well is to go beyond our responsibility for our supply chains. So the rainforests are the lungs of the earth. So we're just running a project there since I think now about 3 years, and is to restore peat swamp forests, because there is such high biodiversity, and this needs to be protected, though we're not sourcing any ingredient out of there. Next slide, please. So next steps, we have, of course, a sustainability strategy, and in the frame of that, we set up a climate strategy as well, with elements which are, further along the path we were going so far. So biodiversity action plans shall be implemented in 10 supply chains the next year, raise the share of biodynamic certified raw materials. We have implemented a seed strategy. We're already there in order to have more variety of the same species. We have a program for healthy soils, and we will, of course, further extend the supply chain verification against the UEBT standard. So from our point of view, it is absolutely important that the industry is engaging, but with the upcoming COP, I think we need the politicians to really support industries in going that way, to protect biodiversity, to protect the climate, and only the industry alone will not be able to make it all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Annette, for the inspiring presentation. And with this, we're going to go directly from Germany to Peru. Gaston, one of the pioneers in the issue of responsible sourcing, you're invited to take the floor, please. You have your camera on.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here, hearing so many efforts from different parts of the world to board on this new challenge in the world to be really responsible for our environment. So I come from Peru. I'm a founder of Candela. That's 32 years ago. In this little tree, you can see the 2020 results, who we work with, the value chain we have, where do we go in different parts of the world, working with producers and organizations. We're small, but we're trying to grow and expand our activities. But basically, the idea we build is the supply chain. And a supply chain, a chain means links, and links has to be strong. If they are not strong, the chain doesn't work. So I can see different actors of the chains here in this meeting, right? So we are one of them, more near to the production area, to the ecosystems. So we develop strong relations with producers directly, promoting the capacities, paying fair prices, right? And on the other hand, we need to deal with the market. So we need to develop technical improvements to be able to offer to ethical companies the best products we can. That's more or less our business model. Please, the next. And talking about vision, environment is a big word, but we are focused on the ecosystem. So we are working for the maintenance and the health of the ecosystems. And on one side, we work with certification that improves us to be better each day. So we do a lot for sustainability with UEBT standard. That's our guide, and also organic and fair trade practices. And on the other hand, working with the people and working with the soil and working with the plants, doing our best connection to be able to protect the future of these ecosystems. That's our vision to be able to go forward in this beautiful world. The next, please. We have, next, please. Hello. Oh, we were asked to talk about what we have learned through all those years, and basically we are dealing with the Amazon. And the Amazon is a very interesting place because people come in thinking that there's going to be an opportunity in the rainforest, and sometimes they just destroy it. They just want to make a living, but usually doesn't happen. So there's a lot of threat on the diversity on the Amazon. And then the initial links of the value chain are really very weak. We work to promote, to train with the producers on how to approach sustainable practices, right? And also sharing information, paying fair prices. That's the way we think that has to be done, because in the other hand, things will just get worse because people need to live, right? So, and it's complicated to work in the rainforest. There are no roads, there wasn't phones a few years ago, so it's to communicate, to transport products, to be able to do social work. It has been challenging. So this is what we learned throughout the years, so people can understand what we face when we try to bring these resources to the market. Next, please. And what are we trying to do for the future? Basically, we have built a little nursery place. So every year we go out and plant trees. We GPS them. We make follow-up with the producers, how they're doing, right? So the idea is to connect them to take responsibility on the growth of this reforestation. The other thing is we want to put in value the forest. The forest has a lot of things that have to be discovered, and not only lumber, not only mining, right? There's a lot of things that can be done, and we plan to do at least 2 more chains for 2025. And we are not able to do things alone. We need to share. So we are looking for working agreements with governments, local governments, with international organizations that are interested in working with us, right? And I just want to say one thing before I'm finished. When God created this world, beautiful world, and created humankind, he decided to give us a paradise. I don't know if you know, but this is paradise. And we need to keep this paradise for us and for the rest of the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaston. And indeed, this is paradise. And I'm always admiring, Gaston, your commitment and your continued energy, because you are also one of the founding members of UEBT, and already by then you were long established and going strong. So thank you so much for all those years of commitment. And with this, we are at the end of the presentations. We're going to the panel discussion. I'm going to ask everybody to switch their camera on. All of you. Of course, we have 10 panelists, and we're not going to be able to speak all at once. We have a number of questions that are going to come up. Not everybody can respond, but I hope for an interactive discussion between all the panelists. And my first question that I really have, and I think Gianluca already started with that, is kind of, if you listen to all the commitments of all the speakers and the companies, is there any takeaways, any inspirations, anything of concern that would be great to hear from you? Who has views on what you've just heard from each other? And if you want to say something, you can either raise your hand physically, or you can raise your hand in your screen. And who wants to go first? So I'm going to start with you, Sebastian, for Martin Bauer. Anything you want to say, anything you want to, that strikes you looking at the different commitments?
No, I'm particularly impressed to hear that we really have a lot of different approaches, but also similarities. So from including, let's say, the human ecosystem into the whole thing, to very specific projects. I think there's a big variety around it. And yeah, I'm also happy that we have these commitments from traders and processing companies like ourselves. But I think much more important, that's one thing I wanted to add before, but I forgot, is actually, you know, we don't deserve all the credit. That credit needs to go to the origins and to the people, to the farmers and collectors, because without these commitments, we really can, you know, make up a lot of things in our minds here in Europe, but we won't really get anywhere. So I think that's the important part for me.
Thank you, Sebastian. And indeed, the diversity and the link to people. Any other comments from other panelists on what we've heard? One important point that I saw was the issue of climate change, and I'm going to ask you to think a little bit about that. Before I do that, Gianluca, I saw your hand go up. You put it down, but I saw it on time, so please.
Just to build on what I was saying before, because it's as Sebastian said, I think very different industries, different angles we're coming from. At the end, there are a lot of commonalities. And I think I would like to link it to the introduction where we were talking about mainstreaming. And I think that mainstreaming also resonates with words that I heard in basically every presentation around the collaboration, the end-to-end engagement with clients, with suppliers all along the chain. The external verification, that is something that is also rings a bell constantly and is going to be part of that future. And then, I mean, listening humbly to especially the people who have their hands on the ground, and we've also had some experience of that. I think that all of this is not just nice theories and slides, but it really needs to be built from the experience and what we learn in the field, from the ground, from exactly those important people that they make a difference in these ecosystems.
Indeed. Finally, the work needs to be done, or a lot of the work needs to be done at the local level, but the whole supply chain needs to participate in that. Does anybody else have a comment on this? And I would like maybe to also zoom in on the fact, so we talked about verifications. For me, that is also assessment, and that goes back to the point that each supply chain is different, and that the measures in each supply chain are very, very different. And depend on local ecosystems, depend on local cultures. But yeah, any experiences, any thing you want to say based on what you've heard? No, then let's take the issue of climate change, because the issue of climate change has been coming back a lot, and I'm wondering to what extent, because we have a COP on climate change, we have a COP on biodiversity. Are those two, and I'm going to ask this question to you, Marcelo, are those two linked enough? Is this seen as, because I think for you and your supply chains, they're very much linked, but in the international negotiations, is that seen in the same way?
Yeah, Rick, so we are super concerned about it, because from our perspective, when the Paris Agreement was reached 5 years ago, the world was on a different pace, on a different moment. Deforestation was not as high as it is now. And there is this enormous link between getting the carbon metric set and getting nature set as well. Because there is a war that can come out of COP where we start to become more and more carbon positive, but nature negative. So that's super concerning. Unless we have tropical forests standing, there is no Paris Agreement that can be reached. So there is an enormous interconnection between climate and nature. And what we see and what we're trying to build and shape with many others is using the idea of having the two COPs to make that connection. What we think that is really missing, and the missing part of the puzzle, is we have already set the goals for carbon and the NDCs for each country, and companies have carbon metrics and they have carbon standards. We should start doing the same for biodiversity and for nature. Every country should have its own target where it must have its biodiversity set, and companies should also have their commitments and their targets for nature. This is, I think, one of the best ways for us to get and to connect all the the mid-ground that will make the world boundaries possible again, connecting nature and carbon.
Thank you, Marcelo. And indeed, I think I've also heard recently OP2B calling out for a strong link between the Paris Agreement and the Biodiversity Agreement. So we fully support that. Noel, you are sitting in Nigeria, I think on the frontier of the desert. Is climate change any of any direct concern or impact to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, Rick, thank you very much for throwing that question directly at me, because just off the heart, I can quickly say most of the threats some of us would have been hearing emanating from this part of the world, human threats, we have banditry and all terrorism, all emanating. A function of it has been placed at the doorsteps of climate change. For instance, the work we do is very close to where we find the Lake Chad basin, and that lake is shrinking by the day. And this is forcing communities to leave where they originally have grown, groomed, and all of that. So practically we're seeing it. At the moment we started monitoring what we're seeing out here in Nigeria. I can say specifically, we're beginning to see changes in our rain patterns. And so these are beginning to affect the way people live their lives and the way they begin to deal with biodiversity, and it's forcing people back into what we are trying to bring them out of. And these are all some of the challenges we are dealing with. So it's a practical, real life issue that is happening with us, and we are feeling that impact. And that is why we are navigating most of our commitments towards engaging the people, creating awareness, helping people, everybody hands together, hand on hand, shoulder to shoulder, trying to see where and how we can mitigate some of these actions. So practically we're letting people know the way we do things, the way we assess biodiversity, the way we use them are all contributing issues to the issue of climate change. So it's a practical everyday thing for us, because we are seeing desertification, we are seeing famine, we are seeing water scarcity, and it's all based on the way we use, primarily the way we interface with nature and people. And so that's where Refem, we are beginning to strategize, make commitments, build around some of these communities. And the big thing really for us, I must say this, Rick, is that the little work we're doing is beginning to gain attention, especially with policymakers. I mean, politicians now, and that is beginning to work for us. So I must say it's a little plus for us, but we can do very much more.
Thank you so much, Noel. And it's so interesting to see how these big discussions that we read about in the newspaper and the climate change, that how it's impacting the local producer locally directly. And I think it's going to be a big concern. And I think, Gaston, you want to add something to this. Is that correct? Working directly with the suppliers as well?
Yes. I have a very good example. 2018, there was too much rain, and the production of Brazil, of the Amazon nuts, came down almost 75%. That meant not only that people had less nuts to sell, but also in the market, there were nuts to offer. So the price went up so high that many companies delisted the nuts from their product. And then next year, there were nuts, they didn't want the nuts. So the price came down. So these fluctuations just destroys the reliability of this product that depends completely of climate, absolutely, because it's a wild product. So climate change is really could be very complicated, especially for the initial links of the supply chain.
Thank you, Gaston. And indeed, we're going to see supply chain disruptions, I think, linked to climate change. Annette, you were mentioning in your last slides your climate change strategy. Is there any link between the climate change strategy and the biodiversity goals? Are you the carbon sequestration goals?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the biodiversity actions we are taking, they're part of the climate strategy, because biodiversity has so much impact on climate, and the other way around, climate has a huge impact on biodiversity. So we need to do things, and just to follow up on what Gaston and Noel have been saying, yes, we face that as well, that suddenly suppliers, farmers don't have the same amount of crop as they're used to due to climate changes. So one of our goals within the climate strategy is as well to work with those farmers to see which crops could they introduce to their fields instead of the ones they had so far, which will not survive with the climate change. But therefore, we need biodiversity action plans to see what are the crops would be really good for the biodiversity in the cultivation or collection area or wherever. So this is all linked one to the other and should not be seen as separate points from our point of view.
Thank you, Annette. Maybe let's change the topic a little bit. I don't know, you've probably all seen a recent post from Greta Thunberg where she was saying something like blah, 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 nature-based solutions. If she would have listened to this panel, she would also probably have said blah, 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 all commitments, no action. So if she would have said that, what would you have said to this? What would have been your response? Cecile, I'm going to call on you.
I would have said that, of course, this journey needs, anyway, a lot of efforts from company, and that's true that we have to make sure our action meets our ambitions through rapid implementation, and we have to show proofs. And I was speaking about the luxury sector, saying that we do not like certification, but just have a look at how it changed so fast. So it means that we are on the good way, to show and to prove what we do, to prove our investment, to prove the transparency, and we are accountant to the next generation, the new generation on what we do. Absolutely.
Okay, and Annette, I think your hand went up, and if it didn't, now I still want to hear what you would have said.
Thank you, Rick. My hand went up because if she would say she doesn't see any action, she didn't listen to all these presentations where I've seen a lot of action coming along. But at the same time, of course, I would know she is right. This is all what we're doing. Great, but not enough. And this is what I said in my presentation as well. It needs to be all parts working on the topic, be it politicians with global laws and legislations, which would help the industry to come along faster and globally on the same level, but as well consumers to change behavior and to rather look for products where the industry behind is really taking responsibility.
Yeah, so indeed the issue of not doing enough, Sebastian, if Yves Rocher would want to double what it is doing now, what would it take? I mean, so why are companies doing a lot but not enough? I mean, can you just, from your experience that you're pushing change in the company, what are the limitations that companies are facing?
Maybe we will never do enough. You don't do anything and you don't say anything, people will say it to you and will maybe put the shame on you because you are not doing or saying anything. Whenever you are saying something, people are saying, okay, it will not be enough, or it's blah, blah, as usual. But then we are trying to do something. We are trying to improve, we are trying to do better. And that's something that should be encouraged, clearly, and not saying it's blah, blah. But whenever you want to do more and better, first you have to set really ambitious objectives. And that's really objectives and ambitious objectives that you have to share with all your stakeholders. And I mean, starting from your suppliers, your partners, your employees internally, but also externally, as Annette said, with the consumers. Because we have a responsibility, but we have also maybe a responsibility to educate the consumer to move towards maybe more greener future and maybe a better biodiversity respect. That's for sure.
Thank you. And Sebastian from Martin Bauer, you had a comment on this as well?
I did, yeah. I think that the question is, why is it not going faster? I think there's two answers for me. First one is, it's bloody difficult. You know, it's really difficult. We are talking, I forgot who was saying it, I think Rick, it was you. You need a different approach for every different crop in every different location or country. That is difficult. You need to convince the people in the origins. You need to convince your own people. You need the resources financially, but you also need the know-how and the experts on that. That is really not running around on the streets readily available. So it is really difficult and it takes time. That's the one thing. And the second reason for me that plays a role is, and now we come to Greta's job, is to convince her clientele to actually, to actually pay some money and to buy responsibly. Because one of the questions I read in the chat is, how do you get those costs passed on to the consumer and not the farmer? And it comes to the point of taking the SUV to the climate protests. So, the demand from the consumer side and the awareness on our topics needs to be there as well. These would be the two answers I would give to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I like your point on taking the SUV to the climate protest. But indeed, it is very difficult. The variety of supply chains of ecosystems that everybody is working with and trying to get insight in that, there's a lot of work to be done and a lot to change. Gaston, you also had something to say on this, yeah?
Yes. First of all, it's very easy to criticize, right? When you see things from away, you can say many things. Now, what I've learned is that to make to incorporate this approach of working is a totally new thing, as Martin was saying. Everybody has to understand that this has to get little by little in the DNA of the company. It has to be a political decision of the high management of the companies to make this happen. It's not only having a department that leads with climate issues or has to do with the, sustainable practices. I think it's much more than that. So in that sense, of course, the front runners have to deal with all the criticism. They don't believe, because there's a lot of politics on this, and then companies that are trying to do the right thing receive all the bumps, right? But we have to be resilient and continue working. Time will say.
Marcelo.
Yes, I hear you, Rick, and I think it's not only, I think it was a very interesting speech in the sense that it synthesized the anxiousness and the spirit of a new generation that is not willing to take another 20 years to take action. So young consumers are also young citizens, and they are proposing that the pace of change should be faster. And I think the companies that are connecting here today with us, they agree that we should move on a faster mode. The problem is, how can we cope and how can we make the system provide the resources, as Sebastien mentioned, to foster those changes on one hand, and for consumers themselves to value that when they do their purchase, when they look for and they understand that two products that look similar, they have inside them totally different processes and totally different matters. So I think information is key, awareness is key, and there is a constant work around educating what we're doing and showcasing that there are companies that are only doing blah, 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 but there are many others that are already in the journey and moving fast towards a different business model, a different way of regenerating nature while they produce. So hopefully that's where we all are.
Thank you, Marcelo. And Lisa, I think you wanted to add to this as well?
Yes, because we are in Vietnam and biodiversity is still new in Vietnam. But we see and we understand biodiversity is very important and linked with the climate change. And climate change is very important, is still not only in Vietnam and other countries. So that's why I think, first of all, we need to work with Vietnamese government or other country government first, and they have regulation and they have information for own people and own community in the domestic country can understand and have awareness. And besides us, it's also start from the community. The companies, when they work with the farmer, they also need to change for the farmer to understand about biodiversity and the importance of biodiversity, so that they can see, oh, it can help to protect environment, it can help to prevent climate change. So it is real action we do. We don't say blah, blah, because we need to do action. Because when we do real action and we have an example for all people can understand and can see, it will be easy for all people can do according. So that's my idea from Vietnam.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for that. And indeed, it's finally your work with the local communities, and they will need to take action. And David, maybe to ask you, you mentioned that you've started to have a much more strong relationship and also verification of the local suppliers. How are the local suppliers responding? What is their willingness to contribute and implement practical projects related to these issues? What's your experience?
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience for us. On the surface, they are really keen. They're really engaged in sustainability. They really want to do organic farming and do what is best. So I think we've got some really good suppliers. I think the learning for us was when we went out to verify them, we're used to auditing. And that's part, when you work within a corporate environment, you're having, whether it's financial audits, safety audits, compliance audits, and you're used to all of that terminology. I think what we found when we went out and started auditing our suppliers, they're just not used to this. They're farmers and they've never had an audit before. And you really need to be very careful with the language and the feedback that you provide to them. And that's something, from this first year that we learned was one of our big lessons, I think, is be very careful in the words you use and how you feedback to them. The intention is there. They absolutely want to do the right thing, but you need to phrase it. When you talk about work plans and how do we improve the situation, you've got to talk their language, not corporate language.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's very interesting. And of course, the big missing link in the supply chain, which is the farmers and local communities, they're not sitting in this particular panel. But maybe we can hear a little bit more from you on this, on how you are engaging with your local suppliers, with the farmers, that at least here in the Netherlands, for example, the farmers are being criticized a lot. They're seen as the kind of the bad guys. How do you engage them? How do you work with them, keeping their also their revenues up to a decent level, and oftentimes they're struggling. Who wants to say something on this, on the work that you're doing and the experience, the feedback from those that need to implement the practices at the very local level?
I can chip in there.
Please.
Okay, at the very local level, the basic thing we do is, like the last speaker spoke and said, there is always the willingness on the part of the farmers to take on some of these things. So practically what we've done is to show them where we come alongside them. By that, I mean, we've been able to send in technical support staff to these farmers. But basically, at the point of sales and buy-ins, where we use the UEBT models and standard of saying, hey, for doing what you have done, for taking the heat, for complying to some of these ideas and suggestions that are brought to you, we offer you this percentage higher than whatever every other person around you does. And so that has been a motivating factor for some of our farmers at the very local level. And they see we're not just doing it for the sake of getting materials from them, but that we are committed to their livelihoods, we are committed to the improvement of their lives. And to that extent, we've had this deep cooperation coming from the farmers, the willingness to step on the plate and take on the challenge. So practically, we've tried to encourage them from that viewpoint. Some of our social works with them as well has been an encouragement. They say, nobody comes to us. Yes, we have a government, but we don't see them. But here you are telling us how to improve our ways of lifestyles, living standards and conditions. And so they are willing to listen. So I think for us, the big thing that has happened is breaching that gap, being there for them, putting men ahead of them, people they could talk to, people they could relate to. And at the end of the day, something comes back by way of a little bit more above what every other person is doing. And that becomes an encouragement for the farmers. These are personal experiences that we have on the field.
Thank you, Noel. Lisa.
Yes, because we work directly with a farmer, local farmer in Vietnam, so I can share some of our experience. From beginning, when we work and build value chain with a farmer, the farmers, they don't just on earth, and they have so many questions for us. So at that time, we need to keep calm, and we need to work with the local government also. The local government take responsibility to support the communities and combine between communities and farmer. And then we need to change and make their knowledge become higher, because almost our local farmer is lower knowledge. They are poor ethnic minorities. So of course, we also need to continue keeping calm and work with the farmer. And we need to make for them understand when we come with them, we want to build long-term cooperation with them. And then we sign contract with each household farmer, and we ensure we will buy 100% quantity from them at higher price, at least 10% than higher price, at least 10% than normal market price. So that is the way we work with the farmer, and the farmer can sell at higher price. They are ready to work with our community. And besides that, we also need to create training course every year for the farmer about biodiversity, about no deforestation, expands the afforestation area, using biopesticide in the cultivation process. So that is the way we do with our local government. And of course, it takes a long time to do, but we need to keep our target to do with our strategies. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. That's very interesting to hear from you, working directly with the ethnic minorities in Vietnam. And Gianluca, I think you also wanted to add to this, correct?
Yes, thanks, Rick. And actually, I wanted to build on what Lisa and Noel were saying, because in reality, if you look at guys like us, we only have a few interactions with the local farmers because we leverage companies like yours basically to make a difference. And I think that's where this end-to-end engagement is key, because I mean, we cannot come and say, I mean, this is the way to do, because you are the ones who have the knowledge on the field. And so I think that engagement is key in terms of defining the objectives, but then also supporting and trusting the partners that know the field and know how to put that into place. And linking to what a few people have alluded to before, also ensuring that we create the conditions for the right sharing of economic value. And to Gaston's point, also how to protect that from volatility, which is more and more going to be a challenge.
Wow. A question has come forward from the audience, saying, well, let's suppose that the consumers would be interested in buying sustainable products. Would there be enough sustainable products available at this moment if we would all decide right now that we would be willing to buy those products? Could we, is it available? So, Sebastian, please, from Yves Rocher.
I'm not sure if it will be available just right now. Clearly, there's a lot of effort of a lot of companies to move towards more sustainability. But whenever you deal depending on the business you're in, for example, in cosmetics where we are trying to put more and more natural, sustainable ingredients in our products, for example. For example, at Yves Rocher, we have something around 85 to 90% of natural ingredients average in our products, including makeup, including everything. But the road is still really, really impressive to move towards 100% and to move towards 100% of sustainable and responsible ingredients from natural origins. And I mean, not only botanicals, but only, of course, also mineral products that are really, really heavy to found in a sustainable manner. So I would say it is clearly not possible to have a complete switch at the moment, but we have to work towards that, clearly.
Yeah, and this links to what Sebastian from Martin Bauer was saying as well, that it is very difficult and that there's a lot of work to be done to work in this way. I do have a question. Are there other comments on this question of whether or not it's enough? Annette, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, it is right. There would not be enough volume available if all the industry would now suddenly want to switch. What I wanted to point out with what I said before is the consumer can make the change by demanding such products. And I mean, it's as you can see, it's always consumer is requesting sustainable food products, sustainable cosmetic products, and partially a bit pharmaceuticals. But if you look at all the industries out there using natural ingredients, and no one is requesting sustainability in products like electronics or automotive or wherever, that would make a big portion as well to protecting biodiversity if the consumer would just think of what am I buying, what goes in there, and how is it produced.
Yeah. Marcelo, I saw your hand go up as well.
Yeah, and I agree with my colleagues here. I think, yeah, the answer probably is not yet, but as we talk about upscaling in terms of quality, we should also think about upscaling in terms of sustainability, biodiversity, and use of ingredients. So maybe the answer would be, I think consumers could find more sustainable products than what they're looking for nowadays. And if you get the information behind the products, you check how it was crafted, how many processes were involved, which sort of communities. So I think creating that wave will place sustainability at a higher value, and that will start promoting change alongside with all the public policy regulation that should change together with consumer behavior. So I think there is a lot of room for growing the interest and looking for sustainability in the coming years for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and another point that was made in the chat just now was about the current supply chain disruptions that we're facing in the post-COVID era. Prices are up of raw materials, and I'm just the question is, to what extent will this affect your commitments as a company to biodiversity? Cecile, can you say anything on this? So the current kind of challenges that exist in terms of supply chain disruptions and higher raw material costs, would that affect your commitments in any way?
No, it won't. You can be sure, Rick. And you know, it comes from a luxury actor. And you know, we cannot have the luxury not, you know, to continue on our ambition and targets. Absolutely and naturally.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. And Gianluca, please.
Well, just a very quick comment. No, it will not change. And paradoxically, the fact that probably high oil prices are here to stay will also help us in certain areas like biotech and upcycling to reduce the trade-off and therefore help the consumer to go towards more sustainable options. So in reality, so the supply chain disruptions might not be such a bad thing.
Okay, but Lisa, we hear about factories closing in Vietnam. Are you affected by that at all? this affecting your local supply chains in a way, and would it affect your biodiversity commitments?
Still to me?
No, this was to Lisa. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, it's correct in Vietnam. Because as I mentioned, our local farmers are ethnic minorities, so they have low knowledge. That's why sometimes some farmers, they don't do according our guidance. That's why it will create some problem in our value chain. And besides that, because the cost and the expense for biodiversity or some other international certification is so high. So of course, it will make our price become higher than the price, market price. So sometimes we feel it is a bit difficult for us to contact with consumer. Yeah. And the number of consumer will be small. Yeah.
Okay. So we're almost getting to the end of, we have 8 minutes left. We're getting to the end of the panel. And for those that are listening, is there anything you would like to share, any tip that you want to give for those companies that are currently want to engage, start on this journey of a more responsible and ethical sourcing? It would be great to hear from you what your takeaways are, and that's based on your experience. Does anybody want to start with that?
I would like to say something.
Please, Gaston.
I think in this particular question you proposed, I think UEBT has an incredible role as an advisor to companies that don't know where to start, what to do, you know, and I think UEBT have built so much experience throughout these years that you should be really giving out some kind of guidance with your newsletters, you know, explaining people that this is possible, that this can be done, because people are so worried about their own things that to think about a new thing and not knowing where to start is very complicated sometimes. So I think UEBT has a beautiful opportunity there.
No, indeed, Gaston, and that's a very good point. But at the same time, you know, like you are depending on the local suppliers to make the change, we are finally depending on you to make the change within your companies. And in that sense, it would be great to hear what has worked for you, what's within your company worked in embarking on this journey or making it happen.
To be resilient.
Resilience. Okay.
Resilience.
I'm gonna ask all of you. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask Sebastian, Sieben, any key learning from your experience on what made it happen?
Well, it's happening, right? It's not done. It's happening.
Yeah.
And trust the process. The demand is there. The necessity is there. There will be periods where you are losing results, where you are having higher costs than you were expecting, but we are on the right track with it. So maybe that's also what Gaston was saying, is be resilient, is trust in the process. It's happening. For the future of your business, you need to be there.
Yeah. Annette?
Thank you, Rick. You need a strong company commitment, definitely. You need engaged people, and I agree to what Gaston and Sebastian just said. Having the right partner, which leads you through all that, and see it as a journey. Make your mistakes, learn from them, but the journey is going on, and you have ups and downs. But just follow the path.
Marcelo?
Yeah, totally agree with my colleagues here. I think that normally companies, sometimes they separate what is the business with what is CSR or sustainability seen as extra. I think it's important for us to place everything as one thing and to consider the nature and our position within business leaders and business activities also relate on how we relate to the world as a whole. So when you put the metrics together and when you place the initiatives on a way that you can measure the efforts of connecting with sourcing and the way that we see products, and once you place the targets, then it becomes business practice, right? So for business, it's easy. when you know how to score yourself and what gets measured, gets done. So it's part of making one nature of business and nature assembling together. I think that's UEBT is helping a lot us throughout the years doing that.
Great. And Cecile, do you want to say anything to this?
Yes, I really do agree with the last word of Marcelo. You know, it definitely provides for us an opportunity to cooperate internally, of course, and externally to everyone's benefits. And since the change will be much more significant if we join forces, and even when we are speaking again, you know, of the luxury sector, because it's my testimony. You know, we are very proud at Guerlain to be a pioneer in this field, because I think it encouraged all the maisons in the Refem group to do the same.
Yeah. And Sebastian, Yves Rocher, what your experience? Any takeaway? Any advice?
What can I add more? Everybody talk about the company commitment, and for Yves Rocher, it's clearly since the beginning, because you know the name, the brand, is the name of the founder of the company, Yves Rocher, and he had these commitments since the beginning to give back to nature what nature offers us. So it's clear something that is in the DNA of the company, really important as DNA and values of the company, the employees, but also a lot of people mention also the fact of seeing the stakeholders or the different actors of the value chain as partners. That begins with the suppliers that I do not see only as suppliers, but also as partners, because we can't do this thing alone. We have to do that all along the value chain. So maybe my key learnings will be to work really together as partners to maybe have a brighter future.
Thank you. And David, knowing it's very late in Australia, but I'm still going to ask you to say something on this.
Not much more to add, Rick, I suppose, other than be ambitious. I think we know where consumers are going to take us, and I think it's best to be out there leading and ambitious with your plans, because I think we all know we're going to end up, we are going to have to be more sustainable at the end of the day. So just get on and do it. It is a slow and painful process, but stick with it and get on and do it.
All right. Gianluca?
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, because it's 100% in line with what I just heard. We also have a family name, which is our brand. So like Yves Rocher, I mean, we fully embed those values in our day-to-day. And I sometimes say, and I think Sebastien, Marcelo also said it, it's not business or sustainability. I mean, this, I like to say sometimes, is becoming a license to do business. So if you don't do this, we simply don't do business. So it's in our genes, it needs to be understood, and it's fully understood. And yes, then, as also David underlined, Cecile, I mean, I think it's also working with like-minded people on the client side, on the supplier side, on the partner side, to build that end-to-end view and drive the change all along the chain.
All right, thank you. Lisa, one word, one takeaway.
Yes, okay. Let me think. Okay, so I think with Vinasamex, even we are a new member of UEBT, but we receive so many values from UEBT. So we hope we can receive more support from UEBT, so that we can make our prestige, reputation, and also brand in the international market. And we also need to receive support from UEBT in Vietnam, can make the promotion, the value of UEBT and biodiversity principle for all enterprise from Vietnam can know and they can do according in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. And Noel, and please one word, and with that we're going to close the session. We're hitting exactly the 5 o'clock mark. So you get one word on lesson learned, a tip for the audience.
Okay, I'm going to say for this to continue. Yeah, we mentioned commitment, but in my own experience, we are looking at the issue of trust. When the local farmers trust you, you stay in there with them, it makes it happen.
All right. Thank you so much, with these lovely words. Trust indeed is very much needed. Collaboration is needed, and I'm also happy to say that a lot of the companies that are sitting in this panel here are collaborating, are working together, and let's continue to do so. It is 5 o'clock. I would like to thank you for your contribution, and let's all continue to make a call to the CBD and to the countries that are negotiating to come up with a strong biodiversity framework that allows us to measure and set targets and monitor those. Thank you so much for spending all this time with us. It's been extremely interesting discussion. Have a nice evening. Have a nice rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.